Welcome to all my friends. It's quite an unusual day, a Saturday, but I guess good conversations can take place anytime, any day. Saturday is no exception at all. So here we are with a fresh episode of DynamicCIO LinkedIn Live with a very agile, futuristic, pragmatic business leader who has absolutely no qualms in calling himself an accidental CIO. Why does he say that? He only will explain in during this freewheeling, interactive, and no holds barred discussion, which I'm going to have with none other than Jagdish Belwal, fondly known as JCB. And you know what JCB machines are famous for. They are famous for deep digging, deep excavations, demolishing old to construct something new. Jagdish recently found his own company called Jagdish Belwal Advisory and has had a very illustrious career as a CIO. He has worked as a global CIO of Webtec Corporation, which was earlier known as GE Transportation. And before that, he was the CIO of Tata Motors, where he spent the so-called golden era of his career. He's one of those few CIOs who would like to call a spade a spade. And I would now like to invite him in the conversation. How are you, Jagdish? How are you doing?
Hey, good noon, Rahul. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, happy to talk to you again.
Thank you very much for being on this show. As I said in the beginning, this is going to be a very no holds barred discussion, very free flowing. I would advise all my guests and delegates, peers, friends who have joined to freely ask questions, interact with Jagdish. I mean, that will not be a two-way interaction. If you put something as a question, I will ask it on your behalf. Feel free to interact on LinkedIn in text format as much as you can. So in the beginning, we would like to begin with your own career and progress, professional journey, so to say, the story of an accidental CIO in nutshell.
Okay, so Rahul, when I'm a mechanical engineer and I joined Tata Motors for the love of automobiles. But then very quickly, I figured out that, I wanted to work with spanners and tools. And the bigger opportunity for doing that was in the excavator division of Tata Motors, which later on became Tata Hitachi. So I went there, and that was a hard life because I was in the field in my tangri, the boiler suit, repairing excavators and cranes 20 days a month. I got completely suntanned. My mother used to worry about me whether somebody will marry me or not. So, but then, I moved back to headquarters, this time in commercial vehicles, and a lot of learnings that I had in my, field career, I sort of, did them. I implemented them at scale in the, across the entire commercial vehicle dealer network. So some of these were like, for example, taking Kaizen from the factories to the dealers, which was a very big impact actually. And then we started the CRM in Tata Motors. We envisaged a completely crazy plan, which is like connecting all the dealers on one single system and putting a huge analytics on top of that, and then setting up a call center and all that. Somehow the management decided to fund that, that crazy plan. Why I call it crazy plan? Because, till that time, nobody in the global automotive industry had tried that. Okay. And we somehow pulled it off. And, so around the time when we had like done everything, I had a chat with my boss, and, we wanted CRM to be merged into IT. I was leading CRM as an independent function. So I was looking around for, business roles, wanted, so some roles in, let's say, service leadership, okay, or, anywhere in Tata Motors, when I was looking around for these and looking at handing over, I had started the handing over process in a slow manner to the CIO. Is when, my predecessor, a good friend, of course, he left. And my boss offered me that role, and that's why I call myself an accidental CIO. That it was the accident was my predecessor leaving, vacating the CIO role, and then I occupying it, where I was like, looking at getting out of IT, getting out of technology into other roles. But then, I mean, I was very worried because I didn't know SAP, I didn't know, infrastructure, I didn't know a lot of things, information security. But I said, yeah, when I started CRM, I didn't know CRM as well, so maybe we'll better learn it.
So, I mean, it is fascinating to know that a person who was not so inclined to get into IT kind of immersed himself in technology and did excellent stuff. I mean, enviable stuff, if I may say so. So the accident was worth happening. But once that happened, how was the CIO in you born, and how did you nurture yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I see. I came from business, so I was like very much in touch with the business leaders, and I call myself. I used to be the biggest critique of IT because of how like they were very happy, just doing the infrastructure and network and giving us the PCs and laptops and all of that. Whereas we wanted so much more, in terms of information part of the. So there are two parts of IT. There's an information part of IT, and there's just a technology part of IT. So there was so much of, like, I would say, hunger for information when I was in business. And when I came on this side, I said, oh my God, like, but I knew, what I had, that empathy of, what business guys think about IT, what their expectations from IT are. And then when I kind of took a stock, I found that, we are like far, far away from it. Okay. So there were so many things, which were where there was like big holes, right from the structure in terms of, how we were looking at outsourcing, how we were looking at IT's agenda. So, well, first 6 months of my CIO role was like doing some fixes in terms of, like, taking care of the fires. Uh, and then I said, I stepped back and I said, no, I can't be fighting fires all the time. I need to sort of shape it in a little different way. So I created a small internal cross-functional team of some, good next line leaders from IT organization. IT organization itself was very small. We were about 15 people. And that too after merging the 10-member CRM team with the IT organization. Okay. So it was very inadequate for the size of Tata Motors. So my starting point was, since I came from business, I said, where is the business strategy? So we collected the business strategies, and then we started, like, mapping it. Okay, the business wants to do in the next 3 to 5 years, they want to do something new in this regard. They want to go here, they want to scale up this, etc., etc. And then when we mapped it, logically, to whether we have that kind of capability in our IT systems, networks, and all of that, we found the gaps. Right? So my strategy became, sort of a mapping of these gaps. Okay, and the gaps were big. We were not well funded. And then, we also tried to answer a lot of other questions, like, what we will outsource, what we will not outsource, because we were outsourcing almost everything. There were partner people around for doing everything. And then, we also set up certain, IT principles, how we will be taking decisions as we take IT forward. So I used a template for doing all of this. But these were like some really, really great discussions, for about 5 months, which, sort of resulted in an IT strategy. And when I showed it to, the executive committee, and it was a revelation that, nobody told us this before. And I got the mandate. They kind of liked everything they saw. And then I got the mandate. Uh, and yeah, then the transformation started. But the starting point was, looking at where the business is going, and am I ready for that?
Yeah, I mean, IT can happen in many ways. One way of doing IT, or one way of implementing technology, deploying technology, is the reactive way that you are asked to do a certain type of things. I'm not saying that that's a wrong approach, but that's also not a very healthy or very futuristic approach to my mind, in my mind. But there is a proactive approach. I mean, there may be frictions in while you are being proactive, there might be frictions. People might try to go to the extent of sabotaging your plan. But I want to know, I mean, this is where I want to know, you know where does the CIO position stands in the organization. So when you evolved into a full-fledged CIO, were you invited into the boardroom? First question, yes or no. When did that happen in your career? What kind of atmosphere? What is the atmosphere in a typical boardroom meeting when the CIO is sitting there? How much time does the CIO get from the board? I'm very keen to know, because I hear from a lot of CIOs that they are now part of board meetings. I hear it from everybody. I mean, right from McKinsey to Gartner to Forrester to IDC to whatever analysts are saying globally, that CIO's position is there in the boardroom. I want to demystify this myth. How is the CIO placed in the order of preference? That's where we will start our real conversation.
Yeah. So I'll tell you my experience. Okay. So when I was when I took over as the CIO, I don't think I also call it an accidental CIO, because I don't think a lot of people thought that I am like the right person for the job, because as I said, I was not a career IT guy and all of that. But probably one of the reasons for the accident was that I took over as CIO in 2009, and 2008, the financial crisis had happened. So, of course, I would tend to believe that I got the role because the company couldn't afford a much higher paid CIO. And now that I'm out of the careers, I can bring some of these perspectives. So um, and then it was, as I said, there wasn't like too much expected out of IT beyond the automations and the infrastructure and all. We had a very good partner. Um, we had a very good internal partner, and I would say an outsourcing relationships, and also operations was like no big deal. Okay. Um, so CIO was a bit of a invisible, I would say, role out there. It was based in Pune also, whereas the headquarters was in Mumbai. So it was like on demand. Okay, but then um, I had a view, because I had kind of created that transformation in the CRM space, where sales and marketing, we had created such a major, I would say, disruption in terms of bringing a huge amount of analytic based decision making, empowering dealers and everybody in the chain. I wanted to make that difference. I was like, it's unfair to my manufacturing guys, supply chain guys, HR people, if they don't have the power that I have been able to create in the sales and marketing. Okay. But as you rightly said, it wasn't there. Okay. And so I had to create my own space. And, I think the best way to create that space is to create an agenda which kind of, people say, yes, this is what is required. So that is what I did with that, with that strategy. And I think building that strategy, I would say, got me the mind share of, the business leaders, the CXOs. I was way, way down in the hierarchy, for that matter. People in the executive committee were at like, vice president and president level. I was something like a much below that, something like a deputy general manager level. Okay. So it was hard. And, but then, I mean, my validation was that if you do good work, if you bring in that thought leadership, okay, if you do work that people can attach to that. Oh yes, if I do this, if I work along with this guy, I'm going to do better, right? So that kind of collaborative success visualizing that kind of collaborative success. I think those are the things that got me the attention and the seat on the table.
No, I completely, I mean, I can now understand, since you are not in an active function and you can speak freely, how important it is to for people to understand that, it is not an automatically, I mean, given, it's not a given that you are offered something to be present in the board. You have to make effort to be there. You have to make yourself, I mean, you have to be heard. And to be heard, you have to make the right noises. I mean, the right noises at the right decibel level. Sometimes making the noise is also called a nuisance. So if I can ask a little orthodox, I mean, offbeat question that, you very well said and accepted that you were way below in the hierarchy when you started this function. You actually rose to the occasion gradually. It happens with every functionary. So you know IT vis-a-vis other functions. My perception is that technology is, I mean, not with the companies like born in cloud or digital natives, the new companies, but legacy companies. Technology is still seen as a support. How much support? I mean, is CIO just supporting technology? I mean, an organization. What is his position in that organization? Uh, and how, if it is, if at all, I can use this word, is he being subjugated by other functions like finance or like sales or like operations?
Yeah, it is. In my opening, this LinkedIn Live last Saturday, I mean last Tuesday, I mentioned some of these complexities. So one of the complexities that is, I would say, ununderstood, not even misunderstood in IT, okay, is the multidimensional complexity. So any other function, let's say whether it is sales or HR or manufacturing, right, just plays on the intersection of two axes. One is the industry and second is the functions. You need to be a manufacturing cat. Okay, then you can decide to specialize either in, let's say, a cement industry or a FMCG industry and all that, right? And things will be similar. But when in IT, there's a third dimension of technology that gets added, whereas the process dimension doesn't go away. An IT function has to cater to every single function: HR, finance, manufacturing, supply chain, everybody, right? And it also has to manage the technology landscape, okay, which is much more complex than, I would say, any other function, also because of the pace of change that happens there, okay. So this kind of complexity, first, see, again, diagnosis is 90% of the treatment. So first, do we understand this complexity, that we are playing at industry, technology, as well as the enterprise processes all across. Okay. So I talk about the first principle thinking. With my first principle thinking, one of the first things I decided to look at is like, what's the play of IT? Where do we really add value? Is it like technology, or I mean, what is it? It's just like automation or providing data center networks. I said no. I said, listen, if you do IT fully well, it eventually leads to a process improvement. Whether it is like taking a typewriter secretary and converting that into an email, which is much faster. That's a process. That's a communication process. And why IT? Why everybody in the organization depends on IT? Because everyone is running some or the other process, right? So the only thing common across all these functions is the processes that you run. Okay. So um, that clarity I developed early, and I kind of bounced it with, I sounded off a lot of people with that, including my own business leaders. And everybody kind of, came around to that it's, your job is not technology per se. Your job is to use technology for, making my processes or transforming my processes. Okay. So I think once, then, then everything then starts around it. Like, for example, we built an IT team which had an equal measure of, technologists as well as, people who were business savvy people, right? Or we call them a cadre of BRMs, right? And then on the technology side, we had people who had a very good, I would say, understanding of these were like process architects. So I didn't know everything, but that clarity helped me shape the organization in such a way that, I have a balance of technology and processes and architecture.
So, just a very transactional question. When you joined as the head of that function or as the CIO, when you accidentally became the CIO, took over from your predecessor. What was the size of the team? How was it? I mean, was it very planned structure of the team? Was it a structured team divided into different functions, or was it a very haphazardly tailored team? And then you had to put a lot of effort, as you said, but you didn't want to be a firefighter always. So, I mean, if you can explain that, how that spiral worked, and how did you reach the top of the spiral when you had stitched it together, and then you are then becoming a manager and a thought leader, then of a firefighter.
So my question, my first question, where is the team?
Okay.
So I was managing CRM, with almost about a 10 member team. And I come on the other side, and CRM was like 30% of IT. And then I come on this side, and so, my CRM was based out of Thane, and my, IT was based out of Pune. So for a few months till my children completed their classes, I operated out of Thane. So, when I would come to Pune, and it was like the place was we had just 5 people there. So I actually had to merge, my team, make it a team of 15 people, reassign some roles. That was the first one to basically make sure that, we cover at least all the management areas. Okay. Then, as I shaped up the strategy, and, one of the major questions that I kind of got an alignment within the organization was, what do you outsource and what do you keep in house? Okay. And even outsourcing, how do you manage? Okay. So what was happening with this kind of a team, and with everything else, coming from, our partners, there was always this, our guys were always like, cornered in terms of like having to make very complex technology and commercial decisions. Okay. Without having any kind of support, or without having, the necessary bandwidth. There was one guy in my team who was basically the IT interface for 3 different plants. Okay. And I'm like, each of my friends, see, I'm again being somebody who has come from business. I'm always anchored on numbers. Okay. I said each of the plants is about 5,000 crores of worth of turnover. 7 plants, 40,000 crores of turnover, right? On an average, each plant is 5,000 crores of turnover. That's like a medium-sized enterprise. And, I don't even have a full-time person for managing that IT. Okay. So then what happened was, when I created that strategy, and when I created that clarity around, what roles we will keep inside, then we started, looking at these numbers, and I created a IT organization model, which was each of the roles was purely, defined by the numbers they are going to manage. Okay. And I think this is my, I would say, advice to my fellow CIOs also, that, the moment you start anchoring yourself on the numbers, okay, you start realizing the impact. I'll give you an example. We didn't have a position of an asset manager. Okay. I said, let's look at the number of assets. We went into a remedy, and we found that there are 43,000 IT assets in Tata Motors without an asset manager, who's basically looking at, the retiral of the assets who are going out of life, right? And therefore we had like a huge amount of junk, inside the organization. So we got these positions, one IT manager for each plant, saying that like we need one person for managing 5,000 crores worth of business, which is supported by IT. Okay. So like that, so that resulted in eventually, as we started anchoring everything on business impact and anchoring everything on numbers, I ended up building a team of 100 plus people. And I think if you look at, for a company of that size, that's a very logical size. I would still say it's not overstaffed, if not understaffed.
Yeah, I mean that's quite some progression, but I mean it can cause frustration, and many people might not like to travel that distance that you did. Probably you had imbibed some philosophy of Tata organization, and therefore you showed that endurance. Otherwise, I have personally heard a lot of CIOs. Can I use this word called cribbing, quote unquote? That I don't have resources, I don't have a team, I don't have I mean, I am not, I'm hungry and starving for budget. I mean, there are a lot of things that come in way for a CIO to be successful in his role. Now, I will ask you a very hard hitting, direct question, which is the topic of our conversation: perception versus reality. So, for me, a person like me who has been working with the CIO community for a seriously long period of my career. It has been around 20 years that I've been working with the CIO community. Probably at that time, the designation CIO didn't exist.
Yeah.
I have seen that growing. For me, CIO is a persona without which or without whose efforts the organization might come to a standstill. That is one level of my perception. The second level of my perception, which comes from some intelligence gathered with personal experience, is that CIO is still stitching together the two ends, bringing the two ends together, making things work, automating, creating some kind of roadmap, creating some kind of technology. I mean, it's it's a street on which the organization can travel for a distance, and then comes a new roadblock, and then a new street is laid out. That's what my understanding, the two perceptions that I talked about. Now, what is the reality? Where does the CIO stand?
Uh, so, I always, to my business leaders also, and to everybody, I used to meet, I used to tell them that, the CIO is like an Indian mother. Okay. That, when she falls sick, the whole household comes to a standstill. But when she's working, nobody realizes the value of and worth of, what she's doing. So, I mean, we know that's how the households are run, right? The mother
Absolutely.
falls ill, and like there's a disruption, and that's that. But then there is still that respect, that natural respect, which is there for the mother, right? And then you have to sort of create that kind of respect. You have to communicate. You have to communicate the value that you're creating. Okay. So it took me some time. So there was a huge I think our amount of work that I did on IT communication and branding. Okay, because see, I came from sales and marketing background. Okay, so in sales and marketing background, one is that you're always competing. Okay, second is that as I said, you're numbers driven. Third is that you are. Uh, uh, I mean, you can't say that competition is stronger, right? So you can't grip. Okay, so
Hmm.
so organization cannot work without an IT function. That's true. But then what is the value that you're contributing? Etc. Like for example, I mean, do we ever even say that, like for example, you implemented a new security technology and how many threats it warded off, right? Do we ever go back and tell somebody? I think we should. Okay. So I was actively communicating these. We had I had newsletter, IT newsletter, which was going to the senior management, and then I had our own IT microsite on SharePoint,
Oh, wow.
so, which we used to update on a weekly basis, and this was like a sort of distributed responsibility. Then I also started an annual IT conference. So no, you would have a spare parts annual conference, you would have service annual conference, sales annual conference, HR annual conference. IT annual conference never happened. So I conceptualized one, and we had and we sort of created an agenda for it that so IT was distributed all across the company, 7 different plants, 2 different delivery centers. So we said everybody comes together in Khandala or Lonavala, okay, for a period of 3 days, and and that was like almost a month-long preparation. And as part of that, we would look at, when you're doing a conference, you have to create those digital assets, right? You have to create videos, and you have to create that experience. How do you create that experience? You have to go back and gather all these things from the business. Now that becomes a very active part of creating that pride. Okay. So we would go back. So all the program sponsors, all the major programs we had completed, we would go back to those program sponsors and say, we want to shoot your video. We want you to say what kind of value IT has added to your function. So a part of what value you are adding is also going back and asking the people to whom you're adding value, say something. Okay. Now, if we don't make that effort, how would they say something, right? So we would and then we would kind of edit and stitch those videos, and we would play them during the conference, and that would really create a sense of pride amongst the people. And in this conference, we would also call business leaders, okay, who would also get a sense of what we are doing, because of all the stuff that we would be presenting in terms of the successes and learnings. It was a way of rewarding the people. So there is an active I would say plan that you need to have around communication. The second thing that you initially started with, Rahul, and I want to cover that, cribbing, right? So I'm a proud man, and I mean, like, somehow I don't like to crib. Okay, I shut up, okay, or I do something about it. So I wrote a post about it, right? Either God give me the courage to change the things that I can, the humility to accept what I can't, and the wisdom to choose between the two. So I have to pick my battles, but but I can't be cribbing about things. I can't complain about things. So for every of these, right from starting from a 5-member organization, to I mean, I would say handling more and more complexity. This has been my principle, that I'm an engineer. My job is to solve problems. Okay. I can't complain about a problem. I have to figure out a way to solve the problem. It may not be a technical solution. It may be sometimes, let's say, a political solution. It may sometimes be, a collaborative solution. It may sometimes, I may have to bring a partner sometimes. But there are, like, this world is full of resources. In such a resourceful world, you can't be cribbing. You have to be solving problems.
Yeah, exactly. Now, two things which I kind of really liked about this particular conversation. I mean, the last part of our conversation is that you have to communicate. I mean, that's where I think the buck stops there. You have to communicate, and you have to communicate not, I mean, don't put volumes of documents that this is, I mean, don't be like a Supreme Court judgment of 500 pages, 600 pages. Communicate in as less words, but as effective words as you can. Another thing that you told about, that IT internally should be rewarded, and people should know what technology is doing for them, to understand the value not only of the leader, which is called CIO, but also of the entire value chain that the CIO leads, the team. Everyone has a very important role to play in that whole supply chain of technology. I will break, the monotony here. There are questions and there are comments coming up. I'm very keen to start those, conversations on those lines now. I will set aside my questions. Maybe if time allows, I'll ask a few more in the end. So Arun Gupta, our dear friend, one of another very vocal, very vocal CIOs that I have known personally for ages. I mean, he could have been the first CIO that I met, if that's not the exaggeration, if I'm making when he was at Shopper's Stop. So he makes a comment saying CIO is the only other CXO apart from CEO within the company who has a holistic view of the entire organization operations. The relegation to the back has largely been due to the fact that CIOs were reluctant communicators. To your point, what do the new age CIOs need to do to get their rightful place in the enterprise? I mean, you can construct a fresh answer to this question. It's a very good point that he has made.
Yeah. So thanks, Arun, for watching. I'm like, I would say, it's a privilege that, you are there on the show. So, yes, I absolutely agree to your point. I made that point earlier that, CIO is dealing with every single function, okay, and not in a superficial manner, okay. It's in a very engaged manner, and that's where I kind of brought up this hypothesis that the job of IT is to actually is the processes, okay. And because we are so intimate with every single department's processes, you're absolutely right that we are probably the next one apart from CEO who has a deep view into each of into the entire organization. Coming to the next one, in terms of CIOs have been reluctant communicators. And see, I always told my team that technology is French and the business runs on English. Every other department in the company, is an English-speaking country. Okay, and we are French. The kind. See, look at the jargon that we use, right? Look at the the terminologies that we use. Look at the way we communicate with each other. Why? When I come across a CIO, it's really a feeling of elation because we can talk the same language. Okay, so 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 we always have to be translators. Okay, I always called the CIO as the this tunnel, right? What is that? The tunnel on the English Channel. There's a name for that tunnel, right? Which connects France and England. The English Channel.
Okay.
Yeah. So I said, like we are there, so we are, so as a CIO or as IT leaders, our job is to translate English into French and French into English, both ways. Okay. Most of the
time. Sorry, I forgot. It's called channel tunnel, I think, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
So, most of the time, what we are doing is we are translating English into French. We are translating what business wants into like French, what our guys have to do. We are not doing it the other way around. We are not translating French into English. And I think that is an extra effort that we need to take. Okay. We need to actively, seek that feedback. Many times, we just give up saying that, the business doesn't understand us. Okay. I would go one level beyond, and I would say, like, what's the problem? Where and why and how, and then try to address it actively in terms of creating a process to communicate effectively. But it's always a learning, and as I said, like the manufacturing people, you have to talk in a different way than let's say marketing people, than to HR people, and that's an art that we have to learn. That's why I call, like, CIO, being a CIO, a little bit more of an art than science.
No, great. I think wonderful. I have another question coming in from Nitin Harne from Tech Mahindra. Nitin says, is it not a top-down approach that makes a CIO successful? I mean, that's what his word. I mean, from board CXO to a CIO, because ultimately it's driven by the business. If you can make sense of it.
Yeah. So it does. It's easier if it is coming top down. Okay. It's a little harder if it is coming bottoms up. Like, for example, my story is a little bit more of like, going bottoms up, where, I was given a role where the expectations were less. And then, I kind of inched my way up in terms of creating that agenda, building the team, getting the investments into IT and all. So eventually, yeah, it's easier, I would say, but it's not impossible if it is from bottoms up. It just requires a lot more hard work.
Great. We have a observation comment by Subbarao Hegde. He says, "Hi Jagdish, nice to hear your view. Life of a CIO is always on and stay connected. What you say? My view: Intel inside. Any problem, then he is visible to the crowd." And this is a very in-depth kind of observation that he has made.
Oh, no, 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 absolutely right. And, I think first 6 months of my role into the CIO, it was like that. I was always on, but I was never comfortable with that. For me, uh, I used to say that, that, I mean, not in a derogatory way, but in a very, I would say, respectful way. I used to say that IT services, especially, and I think where Subbarao is coming from is, from the point of view of that, the escalations can come anytime, anybody can call you anytime and all that. So my take to my team used to be that, let's be like municipal services, right? So the roads are always clean, the water is always flowing, the electricity is always flowing, everything is in place, but you can't see anybody.
Right.
And then there should be an internal escalation mechanism. Like, for example, if the water pipeline broken, somewhere, there is a communication that goes out. There's a tracking or alerting mechanism, and somebody immediately goes out trying to fix it so that next morning you get water, even if it's at night, right? And same thing with electricity, right? So my take on that would be the answers are all in processes that can we move to a model of IT operations where things are much more proactive. Okay, you set up those alerting mechanisms. There are tools for everything, which basically doesn't get the escalations to the CIO. So I love my night sleep, peaceful night sleep, and I would set up every single process, which I have the power to set up, okay, to set it up in such a way that it doesn't get disturbed. So if there are crises, we get an advance alert of the crisis. There's a SOP of that crisis. There's a playbook, okay, which comes into activation. And then, more likely than not, everybody knows what they have to do there. Okay. And then the CIO doesn't get disturbed.
Great. Let me get back to a few set of more questions that I have. Alongside CIO, which is Chief Information Officer that we know of, many new acronyms mushroomed. In my own career span, I have seen those coming up, like a Chief Innovation Officer, a Chief Digital Officer, a Chief Data Officer, a Change Agent, Chief Transformation Officer. There could be many more that I have not named yet. So the question is that in the midst of this chaos of growing number of acronyms, the CIO still survived and went up strength to strength. I mean, that's what I mean. Again, perception. That's my perception. What is your assessment of these different personas? Are they more of a fad, or if they do they add value? Do they exist in the first place in the right spirit of what they are called? How do these personas coexist?
So I think there are more talent acquisition strategies than the personas per se. you know, you're not able to attract good talent by calling it the role as CIO. And, just basically say that it's a chief transformation officer role, and apart from the CIO role, you have to do one, two, three more things, etc. But I think, see, we have to go beyond designations. I always have this horse versus cart principle. Okay, so I mean, dipping back into my story, I was given the role of a CIO, but that I could have been happy with that. But I knew that what I am doing is not a CIO role; it's an IT manager role. Okay, so I need to raise the level of that role. What is a chief information officer? If I go to a classical definition of a chief information officer, I'm not doing half the things. I'm not even there in the executive committee. I'm, I don't even have a strategy. So, the horse is like, the capabilities that you build and, the kind of impact that you create. And the designations are like the cards, which tag along to you.
Okay.
By the way,
Another.
by the way, Rahul,
Sorry.
there is one designation that I asked my management to give me, okay, which was Chief Process Officer.
Okay. Was it given?
No, I didn't get that. They just laughed at it because there is no such role existing around, which is a Chief Process Officer. But I mean, most of my career as a CIO, I have looked at myself as the Chief Process Officer, somebody
I mean,
who
yeah. I mean,
has to improve the performance of all the organization processes.
some people might have thought about it before disallowing you to assume that organization, because that's something which might nudge at the right place, but people might get a little discomforted with that nudge. I can understand that. Another question which came quite early on the discussion by Jayant G, asking Jagdish Belwal sir, which year did you drive this initiative of CRM and connecting all the dealers network? I mean, that's just about
Okay.
asking
Yeah,
about
yeah. So in terms of timing of, so let me quickly take you back through my timings. I passed out in 1994 from MNNIT Allahabad, now Prayagraj. And so 5 years I did the job of a service engineer till about 99. And then till about 2002, I was in the service headquarters driving these all India transformations in the service function. Then 2002, we started the CRM and I did it for about 7 years till 2009. So that question is again, important because when we connected all these dealers on a single system and we asked them to sort of throw away their existing systems, that time the broadband was not there in India. And, so we actually had to do a side project, which was like, connecting all these dealerships over VSAT as well as VPNs and PLS VPNs. So again, like no crypts, we have to like do what we have to do.
Great. There is yet another question by Thakur Kishore Kunal Singh. He's the digital transformation lead at Iris Global Services. Now he says, how do you see CIO's role different than a business role in today's scenario? Is there any difference between the two, first of all?
Not really actually, because the CIOs, see, that question comes when we sort of in a way disconnect ourselves from, the business results. So as long as you're connected to those business results, as long as you're finding your agenda in the business, you are, you're a business guy. So I don't see that question at all. So I can tell you a story about it, So, I inherited a struggling project. It had been going on for 3 years before I joined. It was about setting up a warranty system in place on SAP. Okay. Whereas we had done 7 years back, we had done a web-based warranty system with lots of complex rules and customizations. And this was struggling. This was like, sort of a, what do you call, neither dead nor alive. And so, then I actually brought in, I didn't like that situation. I brought in the SAP experts and I asked them to kind of review it, why it is happening. And they said was like, you're not using the capability of SAP. You're trying to build your own custom system on SAP. And then, then I said, okay, let me get into it. So I was sitting questioning these requirements, okay, along with our business leader. And I said, can you explain this to me? And he said, Jagdish, this is the business requirement. Okay. So I got up from across the table. I sat next to him and I said, I'm part of business as well. I'm business as well. So can I understand what this business requirement is? Okay. And then of course he explained, he got the message and he explained it to me. But that is something that we need to consciously, keep, thinning the line. We have this, I never like this term called IT and business. Okay. So you always, you always have this term going around, IT and business. I somehow didn't like it. I would rather, I would say, okay, IT is one of the functions. If you want to call, and this is again symbolic. If you want to say that, IT needs to talk to people, it's not IT needs to talk to business. IT needs to talk to other functions. So these symbolisms are also necessary to make sure that, that IT is part of business. And I never saw ourselves as away from business.
True. What stops from believing and strongly recommending that IT is more than any other organization? More than any other function, is the strongest part of business, because IT leads and drives business these days. You can't do a thing about anything. We haven't, by the way, we haven't touched this whole pandemic yet. That is the talk of the town, and everybody starts and ends the dialogue with pandemic, corona, whatever. But yeah, if suppose if the technology wasn't stronger, and by the way, this period actually showed the business resilience. It brought out in wide open, which companies had the best resilience to frictions like these, unpredictable circumstances like these, and which were caught in the quagmire and the whirlwind of not being prepared. Now, that's not the part that I want to discuss. I want to discuss something very intriguing, which has actually troubled me a lot over these 2 decades of my speaking to the CIOs. We have always heard very mushy, rosy, successful. Every battle was won, if I can phrase it like that. Every battle that a CIO waged, in the end, was won. I want to know from you, uh, is that the reality? That was my perception. Now I want you to give me the real sense that, is every battle that the CIO fights within the organization, um, is that won every time that you wage a battle?
If that was true, Rahul, then we wouldn't have the scripts that you talked about earlier, right? So no, not every battle is won, but yeah, it's just that, uh, whenever we talk, and regardless of the function, whenever we talk about successes, we don't talk about failures. Right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to portray that. But then, there are these. But what I really feel missing in the dialogues, that go around is, discussing some of these challenges. Okay. So I've sometimes, I've mentioned to fellow CIOs as well as, to people like you that, there are challenges that CIOs face. 83%. Our good friend Vijay Ramchandran does this annual audit of IT, digital transformation programs, and he reports. I actually spoke to him twice just to confirm, before publishing it. I said, Vijay, is that figure true? And he said, yeah, 83% of IT, investments fail to deliver the ROI. So the picture is not rosy, but then, are we really, are we really having those dialogues, or is it like a, mushy, rosy picture going around? And I think that mushy, rosy picture going around, again, as I'm out of that role and, out of, in a way, some of those obligations, I can tell about it. It's
Absolutely, you should. No hold barred.
see, it's actually just marketing, and we are a participant in that entire marketing machinery of technology industry. Okay, where we only talk about successes and we don't talk about challenges. So that's all I would want to say at
I
this
think
point.
that's quite very bold statement that you've made. Probably most CIOs who are in the current role might, I'm using this word with a heavy caveat, might shy away from accepting this, but yeah, that's the reality that one should accept early. There is absolutely nothing that stops us from accepting failures. Um, Sooner or later they come out and open, and that is the time when you cut a sorry figure, that why didn't it come from you rather than being heard from someone else.
Yeah.
Okay. I have one or two, maybe two more questions, but Nitin again made a comment that, do you see any difference in CIOs who are part of the Western world and the CIOs who are part of the India? How can this gap, if there is a gap existing, how can this gap be bridged?
Yeah. I have thought about a lot because I worked in GE, and I have seen CIOs on the other side of the world. I think there's far more collaboration there, and the CIOs. So there are good and I've seen both good and bad things there. It's much more of a IT is a little bit more of a bureaucracy there, okay, and not so much user focused. But IT at the top, the IT leaders are far more connected to the business, okay, and they use the CIO being part of the boardroom is far more truer in Western organizations than here. And I think one reason that I can also find is that the IT is much more mature and more older, in Western part of the world. I think fundamentally what I see is that um, in the Western world, the impact of IT is much greater because the labor costs are much higher, right? It's far easier in India for you to say that, listen, I don't want this, I'll put five more people. Okay. It's much harder for you to say this in the Western world. And therefore, the need for automation is more because the labor is expensive. Automation is much more respected, the need is more, and therefore, IT has a much greater and more demonstrable impact on business than it has here.
Okay, in the interest of time, I will take a supplementary question from Jayant, and then I will have one last question from my side. We'll have to respect time of all people. So Jayant says that Jagdish Belwal, thanks, sir. I'm trying to imagine all the challenges you must have faced considering the year, and then dealers network not so friendly with the word CRM. So my question is, what are the different strategies you adopted to ensure the CRM gets internalized by all dealers and is a base of managing customer data? I mean, very profound question, so to say.
Yeah, so I think one critical I would say thing that I personally bring to the table in all my work is the change management. As I said, I spent the first good years of my career in with the customer, so I have seen, what does the customer like or doesn't like. I can think from the point of view of customer. I can also think from the point of view of a frontline manager who's handling the customer because I was there, right? So so this strategy that we had in CRM was that CRM should make life easier for the customer, for the service advisor, for the sales executive, for the sales manager and service manager, for the dealer CEO, for my Tata Motors people who are the dealer account managers who are managing the dealer, for the regional manager, and for the so it's like the impact has to be created at all these levels for this to be successful. You break the chain somewhere, okay, you will see the failure. So we designed the whole thing in that way, and I think that's what I have been doing even beyond that. Don't just look at the automation part, look at making a difference to each and every of the users. Okay.
Absolutely. So yeah, so you very logically came down to yourself came down to the last part. You have quit the active career path quite at a high, but quite early too. I must say that. I mean, that's quite a bold decision. I have seen CIOs going to the T before taking this call. So in your advisory role, what have been so far your greatest discoveries? I mean, is digital transformation still, as you referred to Vijay's annual survey findings, and I can also resonate with some of the credible sources which say that billions of dollars that are invested in digital transformation go in trash. Only a few of these efforts are successful. So in your advisory role, I mean, rephrasing the question, what are your greatest discoveries so far? Is digital transformation still a fad, a jargon, yet to find a strong foundation on which it can be built? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I think they say one of my IIM professors long back said that your future is frozen in your past. Okay.
Ah, absolutely.
And I'm
Yeah.
and I'm just quoting him again. That yeah, what made you successful so far, okay, is preventing you from being successful in the future. So the biggest thing that I see missing is the focus on culture.
Mm.
Now, when I went to GE, the day one, I was in office, in a jacket and in a nice t-shirt and all. I'd done my research on GE, and I found that I was like such an odd man out because everybody else was in like jeans and t-shirt, and that kind of intrigued me. And then I came back, and then I said, yeah, GE. When they decided to go digital, the first thing they worked on was culture. Okay, the CEO started like attending more and more office in jeans and a shirt. Okay, and then the organization followed suit. So you know digital is a war of talent. Okay, so everybody is competing for talent, and you can't win that war with with an archaic culture. So I say culture is one of the first things. The second thing which I find is you know uh, that we basically believe in the technology buzzwords, but somewhere missing the business picture. Okay,
Mm.
so not making the connects. And I think the most important thing is you know looking at some shortcuts and some short term fixes. There are no short term fixes. I mean, when I started way back in 2012-13, when I started looking at the digital transformation agenda for Tata Motors, what was the biggest thing I found? I found that our current infrastructure and technology architecture cannot support digital transformation, cannot support that big blast of data and information that's going to come to us. So the first thing we started working on was complete upgrades of our infrastructure and applications. Okay, and that was like a 3-year plan. But we
Oh,
started in 2012, so kind of we were a little more ready. So how many of us are looking at infrastructure upgrades, application upgrades, so that we become a little more open architecture and we create that capacity and capability for transformation? And how many of us are looking at what is the next I would say flash I can create in the next 6 months? And I think that's where most managements also, because see, everybody, I have seen this enough, and I'm sick of it. People are doing things, and they cannot sustain. I'll give you an example. A tire company during the pandemic, and one of the CXOs was a good friend. I played golf with him, and he told me about the digital transformation. He said, "Listen, in the pandemic, we created this portal where you can go and you can find the nearest dealer, and you can actually book a service for your car, in terms of the tire service, etc. Either a change and all of that." Okay.
mm.
And whenever I hear these stories, the first thing I do is like I look at it as a consumer. I went to that portal and I actually tried to book something. Okay, and all I found was hourglass, and I actually kept the portal on for 2 hours. I was facing an hourglass. I told it to him. You know, 2 weeks later, I again went the same hourglass. 2 weeks later, the same hourglass. Okay, so what are we trying to do here? We are trying to create some sort of buzz and news articles rather than really doing serious digital transformation. I
Yeah,
think that
when we talk of automation, what you gave a very nice example, by the way. It can open a Pandora's box, can of worms, if I may say so. But what you see is always this. Create a facade which shows that you have done something digitally, and whatever is the outcome. I mean, I have done it. The server is not responding. Some excuse will come up. But yeah, but in certain cases, for example, when Nissan launched its small car called Quid, I did this whole experiment like you did. I wasted 5,000 rupees on that. I mean, wasted as in they refunded it to me because I didn't buy the car, but they were taking the bookings of cars online at that time. And it was such a smooth sailing process. I can't explain. And they lived up to the promise that they made, that you can book a car online without visiting a showroom. I mean, for a small car, it's a waste of time that you go to a showroom and see all the features are explained in 3D. So that was a very nice experience that I got. Great. One last question I may take from Vipesh Deore. He has a very good question, and I'm sure you will answer it equally, uh, vigorously. In M&A situation, how to handle big ticket software contract terms and conditions in order to manage business stakeholders' expectations. Another very out of turn question, but I want you to answer this.
Yeah, I think the simple answer is that are you looking at it post facto or in advance? So, when you are doing these M&A activities, IT needs to be like an integral part of the due diligence exercise, okay, and the planning. And you must look at, what kind of terms and conditions are there in those software contracts, especially the big ones, the big ticket items. The most software contracts have, that your licensing becomes null and void, in case there's a M&A activity, and that can actually bring you a lot of liability. So it should be part of the risk assessment of the M&A that you should be doing that, not really afterwards. But if that part is covered, then afterwards it becomes a much easier exercise. Actually, now if you're doing a acquisition, then you have a bigger base of users and bigger size, and therefore you have better bargaining power. Okay, but if you're divesting something, then God save you, the divested entity. So yeah, I have horror stories which I can privately share, but that's what I would like to say.
Yeah, that actually leads to a different conversation, which I and you have promised to unfold one day, and then we will have another round of such freewheeling discussion that I've enjoyed thoroughly having with you today. Um, Certainly a very, very enlightening discussion, Jagdish. I and you have been known to each other for a great time now, but this has been my first candid conversation with you. And keep up the good work that you have been doing. I mean, I need to highlight the work that you have been doing in a very nutshell that people should. And there have been comments, by the way. You should read those comments on the LinkedIn, that you have been one of the better CIO personas who have actually become very visible, very vocal about things. I mean, your nuggets that you do while being at the golf course, being at home, you have mastered the art of communication. That is something that everybody should learn. I mean, I'm saying that I'm learning. Every time you do something, I sometimes feel jealous and envious too, that something new, something better, something more engaging. And that is the art that everybody should learn to communicate. I mean, in this conversation, Arun Gupta was there. He was the first one to start a very regular weekly blog, and I was an avid reader of that blog. you know um, uh, so so uh, so that is something that every CIO should practice and learn to do. I mean, we get consumed in day-to-day affairs, we get consumed in things which are very transactional, and forget this aspect of nurturing ourselves, skilling ourselves, and communicating to a very wider audience. That opens that on not only makes you heard within the organization, but also open new vistas. So any last comment that you would like to make before I say close of the session?
No, I mean, I would want to touch upon this part of it. In fact, I have raised this particular point in the CIO WhatsApp groups also. This was way back when, there was this whole conversation around SMAC, social mobile
Uh,
analytics and cloud. And, one part of it was social, right? How to make an organization social. So, again, I look at things much more deeply in terms of like, practicing what you preach, eating your own dog food and all that. So I said, was how can I be a proponent of social in the organization if I'm not myself social, if I have not
Absolutely.
experimented with social media. So I
Bang on.
started. I started developing a serious presence on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and the whole everything I look at it as a learning process, because you can only preach when you have learned. Okay, otherwise it will always be a third party point of view. So my parting message to everybody is like, I think it is. Let's not look at the Bollywood facade. You open the door and there are bushes behind. Let's try to build something really strong. The recognition comes automatically, and we it's a process of learning. The whole thing is changing very fast. We just need to keep learning all the time, and that's what I do. Like, if I look at my first video and
Yeah.
I did a LinkedIn live session, and I watched the recording and I was really embarrassed about it. Then I remembered, I said, listen, when I did my first video posting, again, I cringed on myself. But then, over a period of time, I have learned, I've taken feedback, I've learned, and slowly, like now it is coming to a decent shape, you can say. Uh,
Yeah, parting advice from my side to you, although I'm not in a position to do so, but never hesitate. I mean, when I started my career on stage as an anchor or as a moderator, you know, shitting bricks all the time, perspiring, thinking, how will I perform, fumbled. Even now, I mean, when I go onto stage, I'm prepared. I'm not saying that I'm overconfident, but I'm confidently prepared to do things in a certain manner, and that's what you have done. I mean, you have people should not expect finesse from each other in the word go from the word go. I mean, you have traveled a long distance in a very short time. That's what I can say. So thank you very much for this very, very, very encouraging and freewheeling discussion. And I also thank all the friends who joined us on a Saturday, waiting for the lunch now. So thank you, Jagdish. I hope to see you very soon on our promised topic that we will nudge the community with.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Rahul, and I think really, really engaging discussion.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, and a goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.